Knuckles Comic Issue 32. Monk is absolutely shocked at learning about a hidden city deep within Angel Island, while Knuckles seems to be under a grass-covered pothole thing. And the two climb down a ladder and go down a waterfall, with Knuckles being pushed down as a joke. How do you know that couldn't have killed him? Oh, it turns out that Knuckles was referring to Hydro City. See, here it's very clearly a city, and with no hyphen making clear that it's supposed to be one word, so I'll gladly call it Hydro City. This is a really interesting adaptation of the zone. It was an ancient city, built hundreds of years before Kinopolis even was. Sadly, there hasn't been a single person here ever since Knuckles can remember. What happened to it? Meanwhile, Locke sees the console being activated, so he had apparently triggered the system again, but didn't expect an oddly delayed reaction. The console computer warns him there's an intruder and system compromise, and it turns out they all have less than a minute to save themselves from the place blowing up. Surprisingly, they decide to give up on that, and Locke just has Archimedes warp them away rather than preventing the explosion in the first place. I hope the explosion wasn't big enough to be too much of an inconvenience, like blowing up the entirety of Haven. Knuckles tells Monk off because his torch gave a heat signature that allowed Hunter to see them and threaten them. The two climb a ladder while bickering, and Monk gives Knuckles an electric cable to use the trap. Then Knuckles apparently gets shot at and talks about being in pain, but then Hunter says he actually missed, so that was a relief. And Monk attacks Hunter while he's distracted, causing him to call him a monkey and not an ape for some reason. I don't get the confusion. Monkeys and apes look nothing alike. Hunter thinks that logically the pain from the collars should be overwhelming by now because they're so far away from each other. And then Knuckles seems to, I guess, remove his collar with magic? And then Hunter's rifle starts vibrating. Knuckles had been so angry that it allowed his instincts to take over, unleashing the primal chaos energy residing in him, knocking Hunter out. It makes sense that he'd have such magical power, being the most powerful guardian and all, and the whole comic was building up to something like this. But I have to wonder what the limits are for his powers, because I don't want him to be overpowered, able to do anything, like Enerjack or Elbaset, Eraser, Jin, like Ixis. There should be a limit to what he can and can't do. And we end the story, and the Knuckles comic, with Hunter being trapped in a bubble in the inner core of Haven, with Knuckles saying that he deserves to be in the prison pod for what he did to Monk. While aside from working together with Knuckles out of necessity, Monk never seemed to imply that he was or ever could be a good person. So, whatever. Got what he deserved. Meanwhile, in the next story, Espio says that he'll agree to Valdez's plan, provided that he release everyone else first. Is he going to take advantage of that to avoid going through with the plan? Valdez asks what kind of idiot he takes him for, and says that he's going to take him to the Emerald first. And what makes Espio think Valdez would keep true to his word himself? Espio says to Valdez back on the island that he's surprised he doesn't remember the time the two of them went to see Knuckles in his domain 5 years ago. What makes him think Valdez doesn't remember? Well, he doesn't, but he's roboticized, so he probably got arbitrarily robbed of that memory. He then threatens that he'll only need to press a button on his wrist as the first sign of trouble. Espio says that Knuckles keeps Master Emerald in a safe place in the sewer system under the city, as opposed to in the Chaos Chamber, so either he's lying or they moved it, or it turns out the Chaos Chamber was in the sewer system the whole time. The entrance is in the center of town. Espio then wonders if everything could blow up in his face because the robots can communicate to each other non-verbally through just bleeping somehow. And I misread the bleeps as burps for some reason. Valdez gets dropped down from a trap door by Espio, who seems to send him down into the water and kill him. And then Espio frees the chameleons and says that Valdez was just a warning shot with his explosion from the outside world. And he says that they mean to drag the floating island into their mess, and he decides to go warn everyone of whatever is happening. So this issue was written by Ken Penders, and the first story had Knuckles cooperate with Monk and go into what's revealed to be a city that existed hundreds of years before even Kinopolis, but is sadly now abandoned. Hydro City. I like that, it's interesting. I always pictured the city part just being just a name. It all leads to Hunter being defeated when Knuckles on sheer instinct uses some great guardian powers he never knew he had, something all that foreshadowing about him being really powerful was building up to, but not before Monk was killed off. Not that I care, since he was Knuckles' childhood bully somehow and was a jerk right up to the end, complete with pushing him off a waterfall while laughing about it. Hunter got imprisoned, and I'm left with some unanswered questions about how he knew about the Guardians and Brotherhood and was able to sabotage the surveillance system when he wasn't part of the Brotherhood. And the second story, which is definitely the better of the two, had Espio defeat Valdez by throwing him into the water and save the captured chameleons. But then he goes off to warn everyone about the explosion that almost hit them. Not much to say about this other than glad his risky plan worked. It's a shame about Valdez, I guess, that the only really competent member of Jeffrey's elite is gone, but he never really had a personality for me to care about anyways. So that's it. That's actually the end of the Knuckles comic. That was underwhelming. And I'll reiterate here, the Knuckles comic was much better written than I thought it was going to be. With all the whining and bitching, laughing, and mocking of too many echidnas, mostly by fans of just the games, I went into this expecting a disaster. But what I got was interesting plots, sympathetic new characters, world building, and the best writing Penders had done up to this point. In fact, this is when he actually started to get good. Before this, most of his issues I had a lot of problems with them. Really, I don't mind the other echidnas anymore. I enjoyed the world building. It's not just boring exposition told to by a character like Nicole with the satellites. It's actually showing a storyline with characters to showcase that past history, like the story about Steppenwolf. The main complaint people have is that rather than it always being about Knuckles, there are side plots with side characters. But the side characters are good enough for me to never feel uninvested just because Knuckles isn't always in every panel. I was blown away by how much I liked Julie Sue. Her sassy, spunky, punk personality leading to some great sarcastic quips that are up there with Sonic's in quality. And it's balanced by her having sympathetic moments, not only of her struggling with people mistrusting her because she's a former Dark Legionnaire, even having an arc where she briefly goes back from not knowing where else she can go, but she also has moments of being a compassionate person, hugging Charmy and stuff. That combines with her being very similar to Knuckles in personality, except having a whole different feel to her because she used to be a villain, and I ended up seeing her as the perfect love interest for Knuckles. And I never thought I'd say that, because they're very compatible in personality, and while they do get together faster than I'd expect, Julie Sue's forwardness compared to Sally can explain that. My only complaint is that Soul Touch should have been introduced way later. Its presence makes the whole thing feel a little strangled by the red string, like Knuckles doesn't really love her and is just brainwashed by some kind of magical concept. But it doesn't feel that way nearly as much as I was fearing, because they were still good friends before that for a whole comic by that point. And again, they're very similar in personality, so even without the Soul Touch, they would have found love anyways. I also liked Knuckles' mother, Lara Lee, since she's a warm, loving mother who still scolds Knuckles for being rude to Ether and so she can't discipline, legitimizing her as his mother, and she has a sympathetic plight where she left Locke for having no power in raising her own son, and now is pretty sad at not getting to spend enough time with her son. Not to mention that the way she argues with her ex-husband leads to some pretty enjoyable, relatable, funny conversations. They remind me of a couple I know. I even like her new husband, because he's nice, he comforts her, and he didn't get really jealous of her wanting to go talk with her ex-husband. He even knows a little French, cooking a meal with a French name, so he's kinda cultured, quirky like that. I also was surprised by how much I like Saber. He establishes himself as not only the reasonable authority figure, telling the complaining Brotherhood enough with the hedgehog, but also as a great audience surrogate, pointing out to Locke that he should do less spying and more actually helping Knuckles, and advising him to relax and take a break, being a nice contrast to his workaholic son, who I also grew to like, as while he is an incompetent father, I respect his serious sense of duty and good morals and intentions, and the fact that he eventually realized he should have been there for Knuckles more and told him more, and wants to apologize to him. Hell, I even like the Constable. Constable Remington. He's a serious police official who cares about doing the right thing, to the point of saving some Dark Legionnaires' lives when they were in shock from their cybernetics shorting out. He's competent, and while I expected him to really get in the hero's way, first when Knuckles first found the city when I confusingly turned out to be in another dimension and not back in time, and then when he arrests Julie Sue only to realize she deserved to be with the Chaotix instead. All in all, I was pretty impressed. I love that he can impulse was brought back so it could actually be used as a concept, although the inconsistency with the technology band being so confusing makes me really wish it was never even thought up. And characters limiting that hypocrisy doesn't make me feel better about it. Every instance of hypocrisy at least makes sense. The technology is used when it's necessary, and I'd hate to see a futuristic city concept wasted by never seeing technology used at all. And I was really surprised the comic ended without really using Albion. Like, I thought for sure that there would be an arc where it turns out there's an evil secret in it, but maybe that's gonna be later on. I'm happy for Knuckles getting his mother and father back in his life. That's the thing, while I can't complain that the Echidna history and stuff takes too long to explain, the good thing about the comic when it comes to Knuckles is that it gave Knuckles a life. In the games, I can imagine he just sits in front of the Master Emerald all day, not talking to anyone, not doing anything. And it's so boring that they decided to just ignore him being a guardian entirely. At least in the comic, it gave him a family, a whole group of friends that he's the leader of, a love interest that's actually compatible with him and a great character in their own right, all on Angel Island. And even his people as a whole have a whole history to them that makes it really feel like they put a lot of effort into them, and makes it feel like they live in a living, breathing world. And I think that's swell. Knuckles as a character is the best written he's ever been here. He's not a brain-dead, stupid, gullible moron. As for the gullible part, he's more likely to be paranoid skeptical, and as for the stupid part, he was spelling words even his mom had trouble with when he was a baby, and his idiocy is more in the sense that he has bad social skills and is more of a rude hothead. But again, not too much, so he can actually reason with people instead of just being violent and annoying. He's a serious person and very competent, but still has moments like him being shy and nervous about asking Julie out, and is unhappy with the whole he needs answers thing, making him a good audience surrogate. So he's sympathetic. I'd never describe Knuckles as educated, but that's the comic Knuckles for you. The only problem is that I don't know the limits to his hidden, super powerful guardian power, so it comes off a little like a Deus Ex Machina, risking making him about as overpowered as Enerjack, as they could make him basically do anything. But that does nothing to decrease the tension of when he's in a tough situation. So yeah, aside from issue 13, which was pretty weird, this comic was actually really well written. I don't know what all the fuss was about. Next up is Sonic Super Specials issue 11 and 12.